This is what Hinkley Point C was supposed to look like in 2025. A finished nuclear power station on the Somerset coast, powering 6 million British homes with clean electricity. And this is what it actually looks like today, a construction site. Still, with a price tag that has nearly tripled, and a completion date that keeps moving further into the future. Britain committed to this project over a decade ago. The promise was simple: a new generation of nuclear power, energy independence, and zero-carbon electricity at a fixed, predictable cost. What they got instead is one of the most expensive power stations ever built. A contract that locks British consumers into paying a significantly higher guaranteed price for Hinkley's electricity than many renewable energy projects secured in recent years, and a project that has become a masterclass in how megaprojects go catastrophically wrong. So, what happened? And who is actually going to pay for it? To understand how Britain ended up here, you have to go back to the mid-2000s. The UK was staring down a genuine energy crisis. Its aging fleet of nuclear reactors was approaching retirement. North Sea gas reserves were declining, and climate targets were tightening. The government needed a solution, and it needed one fast. Hinkley Point C was first proposed in 2007, pitched as the anchor of a new generation of British nuclear power. The site in Somerset already had 2 older reactors nearby, so the infrastructure and political groundwork existed. The plan was to build 2 enormous European pressurized reactors, EPRs, a next-generation French design developed by EDF, the state-owned French energy giant. 2 reactors, 3.2 gigawatts of power. Enough in theory to keep the lights on for roughly 1 in 6 British homes for decades. The Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government finally approved construction in 2013. But EDF waited for final sign-off before beginning work. That came in September 2016, at which point the project was estimated to cost £18.1 billion and begin generating power by 2025. On paper, the numbers made sense. Britain would get reliable baseload power. EDF would get a guaranteed price for every unit of electricity produced. And consumers would get energy security. Everyone wins, except that almost nothing went according to plan. It didn't take long for the first warning signs to emerge. In 2017, just 1 year after construction began, costs were revised upwards by £1.5 billion to £19.6 billion. The project team blamed early ground conditions and design complexity, but assured the public the situation was under control. It wasn't. The EPR design required 7,000 substantial design changes to meet British regulations, with 35% more steel and 25% more concrete needed than originally planned. The workforce that was supposed to peak at around 5,000 workers eventually swelled to more than 11,000. Quality control problems compounded things further. Faulty welds, documentation gaps, and contractor coordination failures caused repeated stoppages that ate into the schedule month by month. As one project director put it, going first to restart the nuclear construction industry in Britain after a 20-year pause has been hard. And Hinkley wasn't alone in struggling with the EPR. The first EPR reactor to start construction was at Olkiluoto in Finland in 2005. It was originally intended to be commissioned in 2009 at a cost of around €3 billion. That reactor didn't start commercial operation until 2023. A delay of 14 years and €8 billion over budget. France's own EPR at Flamanville told a nearly identical story, missing its original completion date by over a decade. China built 2 EPRs as well and encountered similar technical obstacles along the way. The EPR design was supposed to be the future of nuclear power. Instead, everywhere it was built, it became a warning sign. Every major Western EPR project built before Hinkley Point C experienced significant delays and cost overruns. That pattern was visible and documented years before Britain fully committed. And yet the project moved forward anyway. Then came a cascade of external blows that nobody had fully planned for. The COVID-19 pandemic, significantly impacted productivity due to social distancing measures and constrained supply chains. Brexit disrupted the flow of skilled workers and specialist materials from Europe at exactly the wrong moment. And the conflict in Ukraine sent inflation soaring across the construction industry, pushing labor and materials costs far beyond any contingency that had been built into the original budget. Each of these events alone would have been manageable. Together, they hit a project that was already stretched thin. Here is where the story gets uncomfortable for British taxpayers, because the construction cost overrun is only half the problem. When the government approved Hinkley in 2016, it signed a contract for difference, a deal guaranteeing EDF a fixed price for every unit of electricity the plant produces for 35 years. The original strike price was set at £92.50 per megawatt hour in 2012 prices, fully indexed to inflation. At the time, that seemed defensible. Today it looks very different. The original strike price has already been adjusted upward to £125 per megawatt hour due to inflation alone. Meanwhile, offshore wind projects signed in recent years have agreed strike prices of around £40 per megawatt hour, less than a third of Hinkley's guaranteed rate. Solar and battery storage are falling in cost every year. The energy landscape of 2016 looks nothing like the energy landscape of today, and the contract Britain signed reflects none of that shift. A National Audit Office report published in 2017 warned that the deal had locked consumers into a risky and expensive project with uncertain strategic and economic benefits. That warning was largely ignored. And the Chinese partner? China General Nuclear Power Group originally held a 33.5% stake in the project. As costs spiraled far beyond the original estimate, the burden of financing those overruns has fallen overwhelmingly on EDF, a company already carrying significant debt from other projects, now on the hook for billions more than it had anticipated. As of early 2026, the cost of Hinkley Point C has surged to more than £48 billion. With EDF warning it could reach £50 billion if further delays occur. That's nearly triple the original estimate. The first reactor will now come online no earlier than 2030, 5 years later than originally promised. And every additional year of delay adds roughly another £1 billion to the final bill. By the time it starts operating, Hinkley Point C will have absorbed tens of billions of pounds of investment, costs that will ultimately be reflected throughout Britain's electricity system for decades to come. So what now? The plant is too far along to cancel. Abandoning it at this stage would mean writing off tens of billions in sunk costs with nothing to show for it. EDF's latest financial statement confirms Unit 1 is now scheduled to begin producing power in 2030, with the full project cost sitting at £35 billion in 2015 prices, which in today's money translates to something closer to £48 to £50 billion. The project will be completed. But the broader question, the one British policymakers and energy experts are now asking loudly, is whether this was ever the right deal to begin with. And more importantly, what lessons does it carry for the next generation of megaprojects already in the pipeline? Because the decisions made today on Sizewell C will be shaped, for better or worse, by everything that went wrong here. The difficulties at Hinkley now threaten to increase EDF's financing needs precisely when the company is preparing to begin construction on 6 new reactors in France and pushing to build another plant at Sizewell C in eastern England, expected to cost a further £38 billion. The same contractor, a very similar reactor design, and a British public that is watching closely this time. Supporters argue that once operational, Hinkley Point C will provide reliable low-carbon electricity for decades and help strengthen Britain's long-term energy security. That case is real and worth taking seriously. But it doesn't change the fundamental question of whether the price paid to get there, in money, in time, and in opportunity cost, was ever justified. Britain signed up for a nuclear renaissance. What it got was a cautionary tale about the gap between political ambition and engineering reality. The Hinkley story isn't a failure of nuclear power as a concept, it's a failure of procurement, planning, and a technology that proved far harder to build than anyone in a government meeting room was willing to admit. It's a story about what happens when the pressure to make a decision outweighs the discipline to make the right one. When the lights finally come on at Hinkley Point C, sometime around 2030, British consumers will spend the next 3.5 decades paying a premium for that lesson. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you found this story interesting, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and there's a lot more where this came from. See you on the next one.